Marcus Johnson stared at the airline CEO's shocked face as he tore up the contract. $2 billion gone because your crew treated me like a criminal for sitting in an empty first-class seat. The executives gasped. Nobody knew the humiliated passenger was actually aerospace industry's procurement director. Before we dive into this shocking story of discrimination at 30,000 feet, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed unfair treatment on a flight, and subscribe to stay updated on powerful stories of justice. Now, let's find out how a simple seat change led to a multi-billion-dollar corporate earthquake. Marcus Johnson stretched his legs as much as the cramped economy seat would allow. At 42, his 6'2" frame protested against the minimal legroom on Atlantic Airways flight ATL 345 from Atlanta to San Francisco. The aerospace engineer absently adjusted his plain navy t-shirt and worn jeans while reviewing notes on his tablet. Despite being procurement director at Global Aerospace Industries, Marcus preferred flying economy. It wasn't about saving money. His annual salary easily placed him in the top 1% of earners. It was principle. He'd grown up watching his parents scrimp and save, and extravagance never sat well with him, even after his meteoric rise through the aerospace industry. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The captain has turned off the seatbelt sign, and you're free to move about the cabin. Marcus glanced up from his tablet, rolling his shoulders to release the tension. Through the curtain separating economy from first class, he noticed something peculiar. Half the premium seats sat empty. He checked his watch. 3 more hours of flight time stretched ahead. An idea formed. Why not use one of those empty seats? The airline wouldn't lose revenue on an already departed flight with vacant, premium seating. Marcus gathered his tablet and small carry-on bag, then made his way toward the front of the aircraft. First class looked like another world compared to the packed economy section. Spacious leather seats, actual legroom, passengers already enjoying complimentary drinks. Marcus slid into an empty window seat, sighing with relief as his knees no longer pressed against the seat in front. His relief lasted exactly 73 seconds. "Excuse me." A sharp voice cut through his momentary comfort. Flight attendant Brenda Meyer stood in the aisle, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her expression equally tight. "That seat isn't yours." Marcus smiled politely. "I know. I was in 34B. I noticed these seats were empty and thought, you can't just move to first class," Brenda interrupted, her voice rising. Several first-class passengers looked up from their drinks and devices. "These seats cost thousands more than economy." "I understand," Marcus replied calmly. "But since they're empty and we're already in flight, I thought it wouldn't be an issue. I'm happy to move if someone needs the seat." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "How did you get up here? Did someone let you through the curtain?" The implication was clear. Marcus felt heat rise in his neck. "The curtain wasn't closed. I walked through when the seatbelt sign turned off." "So you just decided to sneak into first class?" Her volume increased further, ensuring everyone in the premium cabin could hear. An older white man in a business suit across the aisle glanced between Marcus and the flight attendant, then quickly returned to his laptop. A woman 2 rows ahead turned to watch the interaction, her expression uncomfortable but silent. "I didn't sneak anywhere," Marcus explained, his voice deliberately even. "I walked up here openly after the seatbelt sign turned off. The seats were empty." Brenda's hand moved to her service phone. "I need to get my supervisor." Within minutes, head flight attendant Richard Tanner arrived. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and a practiced customer service smile that didn't reach his eyes, he assessed the situation quickly. "Sir, I understand there's some confusion about seating arrangements." "No confusion," Marcus replied. "I moved from economy to an empty first-class seat. I'm happy to return if it's against policy, but I don't appreciate being accused of sneaking anywhere." Richard's smile tightened. "Our first-class passengers pay a premium for exclusive service. We can't allow economy passengers to move forward without proper upgrades." "I understand the policy," Marcus responded. A simple, "I'm sorry, but company policy doesn't allow seat changes between cabins" would have sufficed. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your assigned seat." Richard's tone shifted from customer service to authority. Marcus noticed several first-class passengers watching with unconcealed interest. Not one intervened or questioned. The crew's approach. "Is there a problem here?" A third flight attendant had joined them, hand resting on the service phone. "This gentleman decided to move himself to first class without authorization," Richard explained. "We're resolving the situation." The situation was escalating beyond reason. Marcus considered his options. He could continue arguing his point, that an empty seat harmed no one, but the growing hostility from the crew concerned him. As a black man, he'd experienced enough confrontations to recognize when they might spiral into dangerous territory. "If moving to an empty seat is against policy, I'll return to economy," Marcus said, gathering his tablet. "Though I'd suggest reviewing how you approach these situations in the future." Richard's smile returned, victory secured. "That would be best, sir. If you continue to be non-compliant, we may need to divert the flight and have authorities meet us upon landing." Non-compliant. Authorities. The implied threat wasn't subtle. For asking about an empty seat. As Marcus walked back through the curtain, conversation in first class immediately resumed. Passengers relieved the problem had been removed. In economy, curious eyes tracked his return. The passenger beside his original seat, a young white woman with headphones, looked up questioningly. "Everything okay?" she asked, removing one earphone. "Just a misunderstanding about seating," Marcus replied, sliding back into the cramped space. A middle-aged black woman across the aisle caught his eye and shook her head slightly. No words needed. Her expression communicated complete understanding of what had likely transpired. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. He documented the incident while details remained fresh. Names, times, exact phrasing. He'd experienced enough racial profiling to recognize its patterns. The immediate assumption of wrongdoing, the public humiliation rather than discreet conversation, the escalation to threats rather than simple explanation, the language used, sneaking, non-compliant. As he typed, memories surfaced of similar incidents throughout his life. The FOIM, security guard who followed him through department stores as a teenager, the campus police who demanded his ID while crossing his own university campus, the countless times he'd been asked if he belonged in professional settings. This time felt different. Perhaps it was accumulation, each incident adding weight to an already heavy burden. Perhaps it was the stark contrast between his actual position in the aerospace industry and how quickly the crew had judged and dismissed him based on appearance. Or perhaps, approaching midlife, Marcus had simply reached his limit for tolerating such treatment. Whatever the reason, as Flight ATL 345 continued toward San Francisco, Marcus Johnson made a decision. This incident wouldn't be brushed aside with a forced apology and discount voucher. The time for quiet acceptance had passed. Baltimore's Cherry Hill neighborhood shaped Marcus Johnson long before aerospace engineering entered his vocabulary. The son of a postal worker and hospital administrator, Marcus grew up understanding two fundamental truths. Education opened doors, and those doors wouldn't open equally for everyone. His mathematical aptitude appeared early, transforming kitchen tables into impromptu laboratories and backyard landscapes into calculation challenges. By 13, he disassembled and rebuilt the family television while his parents were at work. An experiment that nearly ended badly until he corrected the misplaced circuit connection moments before they returned home. "That mind of yours will take you places," his father often said. "But remember, you'll have to work twice as hard to get half as far." The prediction proved prophetic when Marcus earned a perfect score on his SATs. Yet his guidance counselor suggested community college rather than MIT or Stanford. "Let's be realistic about your options," she'd said, despite his 4.0 GPA and science competition victories. His parents fought that battle alongside him, recruiting their network of community advocates and education professionals. When the acceptance letter from MIT arrived, his mother framed it alongside his rejection letter. "Two sides of America," she called the display. MIT opened intellectual doors while simultaneously introducing Marcus to more sophisticated forms of discrimination. No longer the blatant dismissals of his abilities, but subtle questions about merit-based admissions and assumptions he received special consideration. Despite graduating second in his engineering class, job interviews often included questions about whether he could fit into the company culture. Stanford's Aerospace Engineering Master's program followed, where Marcus found both academic challenges and racial isolation. In classes of 50 students, he typically sat as the only black face. Professors occasionally confused him with the only other black student, a woman in the computer science department. These experiences forged Marcus's approach to his career. He learned to let his work speak first, to build networks based on expertise rather than social connections, and to create opportunities rather than wait for them to be offered. By 35, he had secured patents for 3 critical aerospace manufacturing processes and earned a reputation as both an engineering innovator and shrewd business strategist. Global Aerospace Industries recruited him 7 years ago, offering not just an executive salary, but significant decision-making power. As procurement director, Marcus oversaw billions in contracts, determining which manufacturers would build the aircraft components that kept Global's fleet competitive. His decisions impacted thousands of jobs and millions in shareholder value. Despite his professional success, Marcus maintained his parents' practical values. He lived in a comfortable but modest home. He drove a reliable sedan rather than sports cars, and he typically flew economy, believing first-class extravagance unnecessary for a 3-hour flight. His colleagues often joked about his frugality. The man who controls our $2 billion procurement budget packs lunch from home, his assistant once remarked. Marcus would smile at such comments, but never explained the deeper reason. Experiences had taught him that money and position didn't shield Black Americans from prejudice. Sometimes they just changed its form. The Atlantic Airways incident proved this truth once again. The airline's crew saw a casually dressed black man in first class and immediately calculated an equation with a predetermined answer. He didn't belong there. What they couldn't have known was that Marcus's presence on that flight connected directly to Atlantic Airways' parent company, AeroCorp. Global Aerospace Industries was preparing to replace 30% of its fleet, a $2 billion contract that would sustain the winning manufacturer for years. AeroCorp had reached the finalist stage alongside 2 competitors. Marcus had purposely maintained a low profile during the selection process, allowing his technical team to conduct the preliminary assessments without revealing his direct involvement. Corporate representatives knew they were dealing with Global's procurement team, but hadn't yet met the director who would ultimately influence the final decision. As the San Francisco skyline appeared through the aircraft window, Marcus placed a call to his longtime mentor, Dr. William Chen. Now in his 70s, the retired engineer had guided Marcus through professional challenges for over 20 years. "They threatened to have you arrested for sitting in an empty seat?" Dr. Chen's disbelief carried through the phone as Marcus explained the incident. "Not explicitly, but the implication was clear," Marcus replied, navigating through the airport terminal. The threat about being non-compliant and having authorities waiting. We both know what that means. "Unfortunately, I do." Dr. Chen's sigh carried decades of witnessing similar situations. "What's your plan?" "That's why I'm calling. My instinct is to file a formal complaint, see how they respond." "Going through proper channels first is wise," Dr. Chen agreed. "Document everything while it's fresh. Names, times, exact phrasing. Already done." "Good. And Marcus, remember something important. This isn't just about you anymore. Your position gives you leverage most people in these situations don't have." The conversation continued as Marcus reached his hotel, Dr. Chen offering both tactical advice and emotional support. After they disconnected, Marcus spent hours researching Atlantic Airways' history of passenger complaints. What he discovered disturbed him. Multiple incidents involving passengers of color described similar patterns. Accusations of rule-breaking where none existed, public humiliation rather than private conversation, escalation to security threats for minor issues or misunderstandings. Most complaints disappeared into customer service black holes with generic apologies and insulting voucher offers. More troubling still, the airline's internal culture appeared to actively suppress these concerns. Former employees described pressure, to protect the company rather than address legitimate complaints, particularly when race might be a factor. By morning, Marcus had compiled a comprehensive file, his personal experience contextualized within the airline's broader pattern. As he prepared for his industry meeting, he made two decisions. First, he would pursue a formal complaint through established channels. Second, he would maintain absolute professionalism regarding the procurement contract. Personal experience would not cloud his business judgment, but neither would he remain silent about discriminatory treatment. The aerospace executive conference room awaited, and somewhere in that building, representatives from AeroCorp prepared to make their case for a $2 billion contract, completely unaware that their airline subsidiary had just alienated the very person whose opinion carried significant weight in that decision. Atlantic Airways values your feedback. Your complaint has been assigned reference number AT29875. Due to high volume, responses may take 7 to 10 business days. Marcus frowned at the automated email. The sterile corporate language failed to acknowledge the seriousness of racial discrimination. After his industry meetings concluded, he'd spent an hour meticulously documenting every detail of the incident through the airline's customer service portal. The system limited his submission to 500 words, forcing him to omit crucial context. 3 days later, a response arrived from customer service representative Karen Dixon. Dear valued customer, we regret your experience did not meet expectations. Atlantic Airways has strict policies regarding seating assignments to ensure fairness to all passengers. Our crew members are trained to enforce these policies consistently. As a gesture of goodwill, we've added a $50 travel voucher to your account, valid for 1 year on future Atlantic Airways flights. We appreciate your business. Regards, Karen Dixon, Customer Relations Team. The dismissive response ignored the racial component entirely, focusing instead on policy enforcement, while implying Marcus had been in the wrong. The insulting voucher, $50 against a multi-billion-dollar discrimination issue, demonstrated how little they valued addressing the actual concern. Marcus requested escalation to a supervisor. After 40 minutes navigating an automated phone system, he reached James Wilson, who offered only slight improvement. Sir, I understand your frustration, but our investigation shows the crew followed standard protocol for unauthorized cabin transfers. The issue isn't the policy, Marcus explained for what felt like the dozenth time. It's how the policy was applied, the assumptions made, the public humiliation, the threatening language. We've reviewed the report, and there's no indication of any improper conduct. I'd like to see the report and any footage of the incident, Marcus requested. I'm afraid we can't share that information due to privacy policies, Wilson replied smoothly. However, I can increase the voucher to $100 as a further gesture of goodwill. The conversation continued in circles until Marcus recognized the futility. The airline had clearly decided their approach: minimize, dismiss, and offer token compensation to make the problem go away. That evening, Marcus contacted attorney Sophia Washington, whose firm specialized in discrimination cases. Their 3-hour consultation covered both legal options and practical realities. We could pursue this as a discrimination claim, Sophia explained, her voice matter-of-fact. But I want you to understand the process. These cases typically take 18 to 36 months. The airline will deny racial motivation and claim they were following security protocols. Without video evidence, it becomes your word against theirs. They're refusing to provide the footage, Marcus noted. Not surprising. We could subpoena it eventually, but they may claim it's been automatically deleted by then. Airlines typically preserve footage for 30 to 90 days, unless flagged for retention. So they run out the clock? It's a common tactic, Sophia confirmed. I'm not discouraging you from pursuing this legally. These cases are important. But as your counsel, I want you to have realistic expectations about the timeline and potential outcomes. Marcus considered his options carefully. The legal route offered eventual accountability, but at significant personal cost: years of depositions, hearings, and the emotional toll of reliving the incident repeatedly. Meanwhile, the procurement decision that could impact the airline's parent company approached. What if I pursue a different angle? He asked finally. What did you have in mind? Marcus explained his position at Global Aerospace Industries and the pending contract decision involving AeroCorp. Sophia's expression shifted from professional neutrality to strategic interest. "That creates leverage most discrimination victims don't have," she agreed. "But tread carefully. You'll need to maintain absolute ethical standards in your professional role while simultaneously addressing the discrimination issue." "I intend to keep them entirely separate," Marcus assured her. "The contract will be decided on technical and business merits alone." With legal advice in mind, Marcus posted a carefully worded account of the incident on his personal social media. He omitted names and specific flight details, but described the discriminatory treatment. The post generated immediate reaction, hundreds of comments within hours, many sharing similar experiences. Atlantic Airways' PR team quickly identified the viral post. Their response appeared within 12 hours. "Atlantic Airways is committed to treating all passengers with dignity and respect. We take these allegations seriously and are investigating the matter. Diversity and inclusion are core values of our organization." The generic corporate statement contained no apology, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, or specific commitments to change. Privately, company communications, later revealed through a whistleblower, showed a different approach. Standard social media fire drill: offer bland statement, wait for news cycle to pass. Passenger has no proof, just subjective interpretation. Legal advises no admission of fault. As the online discussion expanded, Aviation Weekly reporter Zoe Chen recognized Marcus's name from industry circles and contacted him for comment. Though he declined a formal interview, their background conversation provided Zoe with context about his industry position and the pending procurement decision. Would you react the same way as Marcus, documenting everything meticulously? Or would you have responded differently to this situation? Comment number 1 if you believe formal complaints through proper channels are the right approach, or number 2 if you think immediate legal action would be more effective. Like this video if you've ever experienced or witnessed similar treatment, and subscribe to follow this story to its shocking conclusion. Now, what would you do if you discovered the airline's parent company was competing for your business? Let's see how this power dynamic unfolds. The day after social media erupted, Marcus received an unexpected call from Victoria Blackwell, CEO of Global Aerospace Industries. "Marcus, I've just heard about this Atlantic Airways situation. Are you all right?" The concern in her voice was genuine. In 4 years working together, Victoria had always demonstrated authentic interest in her executives' well-being beyond their professional contributions. "I'm fine," Marcus assured her, just determined to address it properly. "I've just realized Atlantic Airways is owned by AeroCorp. They're presenting their bid next week." "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "I've been careful to keep the issues separate." "I trust your professional judgment completely," Victoria affirmed. "But I want you to know the company supports you personally as well. If there's anything we can do." "Actually, there might be. I believe AeroCorp executives aren't aware of the situation. Their airline subsidiary probably hasn't escalated a routine customer complaint to corporate level." "The Aerospace Industry Conference is this weekend in San Francisco," Victoria noted. "All the major players will be there for presentations, including AeroCorp's executive team," Marcus agreed. "I think it's time they understand exactly how their subsidiaries treat potential business partners." As the call ended, Marcus researched the conference agenda. AeroCorp CEO Thomas Reynolds was scheduled to present their bid for the global aerospace contract, an opportunity for Marcus to ensure the discrimination issue received appropriate executive attention. The wheels of corporate accountability had begun turning, but whether they would produce meaningful change or simply grind down another legitimate complaint remained to be seen. One thing was certain: the upcoming industry conference would bring a confrontation no one at Atlantic Airways or AeroCorp anticipated. The Aerospace Industry Conference transformed San Francisco's waterfront convention center into a showcase of innovation and corporate competition. Technical exhibitions displayed next-generation materials and propulsion systems, while company representatives networked aggressively, knowing contracts worth billions hung in the balance. Marcus Johnson moved through the crowded exhibition hall, exchanging greetings with industry colleagues while carefully avoiding the prominent AeroCorp display. Several people mentioned his viral social media post, offering support or sharing similar experiences. "Their presentation is scheduled for 2 o'clock in the main auditorium," whispered Rajiv Patel, Marcus's deputy procurement director. "Reynolds himself is presenting. Word is they've prepared something spectacular to secure the global contract." Marcus nodded, checking his watch. "I'll be there." By 1:45, the auditorium filled with industry representatives, technical experts, and financial analysts. AeroCorp had secured the coveted mid-afternoon slot, prime time for major announcements. Marcus selected a seat halfway back, deliberately positioning himself outside the speaker's direct line of sight, but with clear access to the audience microphone. At precisely 2 o'clock, AeroCorp CEO Thomas Reynolds took the stage. Tall, silver-haired, and exuding practiced charisma, Reynolds had masterminded AeroCorp's expansion from regional manufacturer to global aviation powerhouse. "The future of aerospace isn't just about technology," Reynolds began, his voice carrying confidently through the auditorium. "It's about partnerships built on shared values and mutual respect." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. For 30 minutes, Reynolds delivered a masterful presentation highlighting AeroCorp's technical capabilities, manufacturing capacity, and financial stability. Advanced graphics displayed their proposed aircraft specifications, emphasizing fuel efficiency and maintenance cost advantages. "At AeroCorp, we believe our corporate culture sets us apart," Reynolds continued, moving to what marketers called the values proposition section. "Our customer-first approach extends from the boardroom to the cabin, ensuring every interaction reflects our commitment to dignity, respect, and exceptional service." Several slides showcased AeroCorp's diversity initiatives and customer satisfaction metrics. Atlantic Airways featured prominently as their premium service subsidiary, with images of smiling flight attendants assisting diverse passengers. "We don't just build aircraft," Reynolds concluded as the presentation neared its end. "We build relationships based on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. When you choose AeroCorp, you're not just selecting an aircraft manufacturer. You're selecting a partner committed to your success at every level." Applause filled the auditorium as Reynolds opened the floor for questions. Several technical inquiries came first: engineering specifications, production timelines, maintenance requirements. Reynolds and his team handled each professionally, projecting competence and thorough preparation. As the Q&A session continued, Marcus moved toward the audience microphone positioned in the center aisle. He waited patiently as 2 more technical questions were addressed, then stepped forward when the moderator acknowledged him. "Marcus Johnson, Global Aerospace Industries," he introduced himself calmly. A subtle ripple of recognition moved through the audience. Procurement directors rarely asked public questions at such events. Reynolds smiled broadly. "Mr. Johnson, a pleasure. What can we address for you today? You spoke eloquently about corporate culture and how it extends throughout your organization," Marcus began, his tone conversational rather than confrontational. "I'm curious about how you ensure those values translate to daily customer interactions, particularly in your airline subsidiary." If Reynolds recognized potential danger in the question, he didn't show it. "Excellent question. We believe culture flows from leadership. Our core values are incorporated into training programs across all subsidiaries, with particular emphasis on customer-facing positions like flight crews." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "And how do you handle situations where those values aren't demonstrated? For instance, if a passenger experienced discriminatory treatment." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Reynolds' face. "We have zero tolerance for discrimination in any form. All such complaints are taken seriously and investigated thoroughly." "That's reassuring to hear," Marcus continued. "Let me share a hypothetical scenario and get your perspective on how your processes would address it." The atmosphere in the auditorium shifted subtly. Technical questions had given way to something unexpected. Imagine a passenger, let's say a black professional man, boards an Atlantic Airways flight and notices empty first-class seats after takeoff. When he moves to one of those vacant seats, he's immediately confronted by crew members who accuse him of sneaking into first class, publicly humiliate him, and threaten to have authorities waiting upon landing if he doesn't comply with their demands to return to economy. Reynolds's practiced smile faltered slightly. That would be concerning if it occurred. I'd need to understand the specific circumstances. The specific circumstances are that it happened last week, on flight ATL 345, Marcus stated, his voice remaining measured despite the auditorium's growing tension. The passenger submitted a detailed complaint and received a $50 voucher and form letter dismissing concerns about racial profiling. Complete silence fell across the auditorium. Reynolds glanced toward his executive team seated in the front row, several of whom were now frantically checking their phones. I'm not familiar with this specific incident, Reynolds responded carefully. But I assure you, if a complaint of this nature was filed, it would be escalated appropriately. It wasn't escalated, Marcus countered. The passenger was told footage of the incident couldn't be shared due to privacy policies, and Supervisor James Wilson offered a $100 voucher to make the issue disappear. Recognition dawned in Reynolds' eyes as connections formed. Mr. Johnson, are you referring to a personal experience? I am, Marcus confirmed. And I find it interesting that as CEO of a company claiming customer-first values, you're learning about racial discrimination by your subsidiary during an industry conference rather than through your internal escalation processes. Murmurs spread through the audience. Financial analysts began typing furiously on their devices, recognizing the potential impact on AeroCorp's stock price. Reynolds attempted to regain control of the situation. Mr. Johnson, I sincerely apologize for your experience. This is clearly not representative of our values. I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss this privately and ensure it's addressed appropriately. I appreciate that offer, Marcus replied. But I believe transparency matters. When discrimination occurs behind closed doors but apologies happen. In private, nothing changes systematically. I filed a complaint through proper channels specifically to see how your organization would respond. That response, dismissal, minimization, and a token gesture, speaks volumes about the actual culture within your organization. The moderator stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the exchange. Perhaps we should move to the next question. One final point, Marcus continued. Since Mr. Reynolds mentioned partnerships built on shared values, I think it's important for everyone to understand context. I'm not just a passenger who experienced discrimination on an Atlantic Airways flight. I'm the procurement director, whose team will make recommendations on the $2 billion contract AeroCorp is currently pursuing with Global Aerospace Industries. The revelation landed like a thunderclap in the auditorium. Reynolds' face visibly paled as he grasped the full implications. The discrimination incident had not happened to a random passenger with a social media account, but to a key decision-maker in their largest pending contract. Mr. Johnson, Reynolds began, desperation entering his voice, I want to personally assure you. Thank you for your presentation, Marcus interrupted calmly. I look forward to reviewing all aspects of the proposals, including technical specifications, financial terms, and yes, corporate culture alignment before making our recommendation. With that, he stepped away from the microphone and walked toward the exit. The remaining questions proceeded awkwardly, but the damage was done. Throughout the auditorium, attendees whispered and messaged colleagues about what they'd witnessed. As Marcus exited the convention center, his phone buzzed continuously with notifications. Industry publications were already reporting on the exchange. AeroCorp's stock had dropped 3% in 20 minutes, and most significantly, a calendar invitation had appeared from Victoria Blackwell for an emergency meeting about the procurement process. The corporate stakes had just increased exponentially. What began as discrimination against a passenger had transformed into a potential business catastrophe for AeroCorp. Whether this would translate into meaningful change or merely crisis management remained to be seen. Damage control now, Thomas Reynolds barked as his executive team assembled in AeroCorp's San Francisco satellite office 30 minutes after the disastrous conference presentation. Someone explain how this happened. Senior VP of Communications. Patricia Owens grimaced, Atlantic Airways classified it as a standard customer complaint about seating policy. It never flagged for executive review. A standard complaint? Reynolds slammed his hand on the conference table. The procurement director for a $2 billion contract experiences racial discrimination on our airline, and it's classified as standard. Who made that decision? Atlantic Airways has its own customer service protocols, explained Catherine Williams, Senior VP of Subsidiary Operations. They handle thousands of complaints monthly. Their system is designed to bury problems, apparently, Reynolds interrupted. Get Atlantic Airways CEO William Parker on the line immediately. I want the customer service records, the flight crew information, security footage, everything related to this incident. While executives scrambled to collect information, AeroCorp's stock continued its downward trajectory, closing 6% lower as market analysts issued cautionary guidance. Across town, Atlantic Airways headquarters experienced its own emergency. CEO William Parker had received 3 increasingly urgent calls from AeroCorp executives, culminating in a directive to report immediately to the parent company's office with all relevant documentation. Pull everything on flight ATL 345 from last Tuesday, Parker instructed his assistant. Personnel files for the flight crew, security footage, complaint documentation, everything, and get Brenda Myers and Richard Tanner in my office immediately. Within hours, flight attendants Myers and Tanner sat nervously in Parker's office, recounting their versions of the incident. He was trying to access first class without proper boarding documentation, Brenda insisted. I was simply enforcing company policy about cabin boundaries. Did you use the term sneaking into first class? Parker asked, reviewing the complaint. I don't recall my exact wording, Brenda replied defensively. But he was attempting to access premium services he hadn't paid for. Richard Tanner nodded in agreement. We deal with passengers trying to get free upgrades constantly. Our training emphasizes maintaining cabin integrity. And the comment about having authorities meet the aircraft? Parker pressed. Standard protocol for non-compliant passengers, Richard stated. Safety is our primary concern. Parker's expression darkened. Was there any safety issue with this passenger? Both flight attendants hesitated. Not specifically, Richard finally admitted. But unauthorized cabin movement can indicate broader disregard for rules. As the interview continued, Parker's assistant delivered additional documentation. Previous passenger complaints filed against both crew members. The pattern was disturbing. Myers had accumulated 8 complaints regarding rude or dismissive treatment in the past year. 6 came from passengers of color. Tanner's record showed fewer complaints, but more serious allegations, including 3 previous incidents of threatening to involve authorities for minor policy disagreements. Meanwhile, at AeroCorp headquarters, Thomas Reynolds received the preliminary investigation summary with growing alarm. The security footage contradicts the crew's account, he noted, reviewing the timeline. Johnson moved to first class openly, not furtively as described, and there were 7 empty first-class seats remaining unoccupied throughout the flight. Legal advises caution in any public statement, Patricia Owens warned. Acknowledging discriminatory treatment creates liability. Reynolds exploded. Liability? We're facing the potential loss of a $2 billion contract. Get someone from legal in here who understands the actual stakes. As executives debated strategy, Catherine Williams received an urgent message. Atlantic Airways' initial customer, service representative, Karen Dixon, has previous documented incidents of mishandling discrimination complaints. There's an internal memo suggesting customer service staff were instructed to categorize racial complaints as general service, issues to improve diversity metrics. The revelation shifted the crisis from individual behavior to systemic problems. What AeroCorp initially hoped to contain as a single incident involving overzealous employees now appeared to reflect deeper cultural issues throughout their airline subsidiary. 7 hours after the conference confrontation, Reynolds authorized a direct call to Marcus Johnson. The procurement director declined, indicating all communication should occur through official channels given the active contract evaluation. He's using corporate protocol against us, Reynolds noted with grudging respect. The The same barriers that prevented his complaint from reaching appropriate attention now prevent our damage control efforts. With direct outreach rebuffed, Reynolds approved Catherine Williams's plan to meet personally with Marcus, bringing a comprehensive response package, including policy changes, training commitments, and a substantial settlement offer with confidentiality provisions. The following morning, Catherine arrived at Global Aerospace Industries' San Francisco office with a team of executives and legal representatives. To their surprise, Marcus agreed to the meeting, though he brought his own attorney, Sophia Washington. "Mr. Johnson," Catherine began after introductions. "First, on behalf of AeroCorp and Atlantic Airways, I want to offer our sincerest apology for your experience. What occurred was unacceptable and contrary to our values." Marcus acknowledged the apology with a slight nod but remained silent. "We've taken immediate action," Catherine continued. "Both flight attendants have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We've reviewed your complete complaint and the security footage which confirms your account." She slid a folder across the conference table. "We'd like to offer a resolution package including compensation for the distress caused and a confidentiality agreement to resolve this matter amicably." Sophia Washington opened the folder, reviewing the documents with professional detachment. The settlement offer specified 7 figures, substantial by any standard for a discrimination case without physical injury. "This is meant to demonstrate how seriously we take this incident," Catherine emphasized. Marcus leaned forward. "Ms. Williams, I appreciate your visit and the acknowledgement that the incident occurred as I described. However, there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding about my objective." "We're certainly open to discussing the terms," Catherine replied quickly. "It's not about the amount," Marcus clarified. "I'm not interested in financial settlement of any kind, regardless of the figure." Catherine blinked in surprise. "Corporate discrimination cases almost always resolved through financial settlements." "What are you looking for, Mr. Johnson?" "Systemic change," he stated simply. "Not promises, not training programs that check diversity boxes, but fundamental reform in how your company identifies, addresses, and prevents discrimination." Catherine appeared genuinely surprised. "We can certainly discuss policy changes." "I've reviewed Atlantic Airways' history," Marcus continued. "This isn't an isolated incident, but a pattern. Your customer service systematically downgrades discrimination complaints. Your training emphasizes cabin integrity over human dignity. Your corporate culture rewards those who protect the company image rather than address legitimate concerns." The meeting continued for 2 hours as Marcus outlined specific changes required: transparent complaint handling, independent review of discrimination allegations, revised training focusing on unconscious bias, structural accountability measures, and public reporting of incidents and resolutions. AeroCorp's representatives grew increasingly uncomfortable as they realized the extent of changes required. At one point, Catherine attempted to steer the conversation back toward confidential resolution. "These matters are typically handled discreetly to protect all parties," she suggested. "That approach is precisely why discrimination persists," Marcus countered. "Privacy protects the company, not the victims. Transparency creates accountability." As the meeting concluded without resolution, Catherine made a final appeal. "Mr. Johnson, we value your business and want to make this right. Please consider that this contract decision affects thousands of employees who weren't involved in this unfortunate incident." "I'm evaluating the contract solely on merit," Marcus assured her. "But corporate culture is legitimately part of that evaluation. A company that treats potential business partners this way likely has other ethical compromises embedded in its operations." After AeroCorp's team departed, Victoria Blackwell entered the conference room. "How did it go?" "They offered money and confidentiality," Marcus reported. "When that failed, they appealed to protecting jobs." Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "The technical assessment team reports their aircraft specifications slightly outperform competitors. This decision is becoming complicated." "It always was," Marcus replied. "We're not just buying aircraft. We're choosing a business partner for decades. Their technical specifications mean nothing if their corporate ethics are compromised. The confrontation had elevated beyond individual actors or single incidents to fundamental questions about corporate responsibility, systemic discrimination, and whether market forces could drive genuine social change. For Atlantic Airways, what began as a routine customer complaint had escalated to an existential threat to their parent company's largest pending contract. Meanwhile, the Atlantic Airways Flight Attendants Union issued a statement defending crew members' right to enforce cabin boundaries, while separately, internal whistleblowers began contacting journalists with additional accounts of discriminatory patterns within the airline's operations. The corporate earthquake triggered by a simple request for an empty seat continued sending aftershocks throughout both organizations, with the final magnitude yet to be determined. Breaking news in the aviation industry, the CNBC anchor announced. AeroCorp shares fell another 8% today following allegations that its subsidiary, Atlantic Airways, engaged in racial discrimination against a key decision-maker. In a pending $2 billion contract, social media has erupted with the hashtag #RussiaAeroCorporateRacism, now trending nationwide. Marcus Johnson turned down the television volume as his phone rang for the 15th time that hour. The story had expanded beyond industry circles to mainstream media, with journalists seeking comments from all parties involved. He had maintained his policy of directing inquiries to Global Aerospace Industries' Communications Department, focusing instead on the legitimate contract evaluation process. Online, the situation had taken on a life of its own. Marcus's original social media post, combined with reporting from the aerospace conference confrontation, sparked a wave of similar accounts from passengers who had experienced discriminatory treatment on Atlantic Airways flights. I was accused of sneaking into the priority boarding line despite having platinum status, wrote one business traveler. The gate agent loudly questioned if my boarding pass was legitimate while waving. White passengers threw without comment. Aero corporate racism. A retired teacher shared. Flight attendant repeatedly skipped me during beverage service, then acted surprised when I mentioned it. When I requested a complaint form, was told they were out of forms. This was 2023. Aero corporate racism. As stories multiplied, celebrity figures amplified the conversation. Basketball star DeAndre Williams tweeted, "Been flying commercial since I was 6'5" at age 15. Atlantic Airways consistently the worst for profiling. No matter first-class ticket or team charter, always treated like I don't belong." Aero corporate racism is real. Award-winning director Sophia Lee shared, "My experience filming diversity commercial for Atlantic Airways was eye-opening. Executives wanted diverse faces in ads, while simultaneously dismissing concerns from actual diverse employees. This is aero corporate racism." The financial impact intensified as the public narrative solidified. AeroCorp's stock price had fallen 15% in just 2 trading days. Institutional investors began questioning executives about both the discrimination allegations and the potential loss of the global aerospace contract. Competing aircraft manufacturers carefully distanced themselves while highlighting their own diversity initiatives. Westbrook Aerospace issued a statement. At Westbrook, inclusion isn't just a program, but a fundamental operating principle. Our aircraft are built by diverse teams for a diverse world. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations entered the conversation. The National Coalition for Equality requested meetings with Atlantic Airways executives to discuss systemic concerns beyond the individual incident. The Industry Inclusion Project offered to conduct an independent audit of the airline's practices and policies. 5 days after the conference confrontation, Atlantic Airways released their official statement. Atlantic Airways is committed to treating all passengers with dignity and respect. We take the recent allegations seriously and have launched a comprehensive investigation. 2 employees have been placed on administrative leave pending review. We acknowledge that our initial response to Mr. Johnson's complaint failed to address his concerns appropriately. We are reviewing our customer service protocols to ensure all complaints receive proper attention. Atlantic Airways has always valued diversity and inclusion. We are committed to learning from this incident and implementing changes to prevent similar situations in the future. The carefully crafted statement received immediate criticism for its vagueness and lack of specific commitments. Social media. Users quickly identified similar language in previous corporate apologies that had led to no meaningful changes. Public skepticism intensified when national news programs invited Marcus to share his experience. His measured, articulate description of both the incident and subsequent corporate response resonated with viewers. "I'm not interested in punitive measures against individual employees," he explained during a primetime interview. "This is about systems that enable discrimination and corporate cultures that protect the company rather than address legitimate concerns." When asked about the pending contract decision, Marcus maintained his professional stance. Global Aerospace evaluates all potential partners on multiple criteria, including technical specifications, financial terms, and yes, corporate culture alignment. This process continues with complete integrity. Atlantic Airways attempted to counter the narrative by arranging a competing interview with flight attendants Brenda Myers and Richard Tanner. Their appearance backfired dramatically when both insisted they had followed protocol and denied any racial motivation, despite the security footage clearly showing differential treatment. "We would have responded the same way to any passenger attempting to access premium services without appropriate documentation," Brenda maintained, contradicted by multiple accounts of white passengers making similar moves without confrontation. Public opinion polls following both interviews showed over 70% of respondents believed racial bias had influenced the crew's actions. More significantly, 65% indicated they would consider alternative airlines for future travel plans. Did you ever witness unfair treatment and wish you had the power to create real change? Comment number 1 if you believe Marcus is handling this situation with appropriate professionalism, or number 2 if you think he should be more aggressive in leveraging his position. Like this video if you support holding companies accountable for discriminatory practices, and subscribe to see more stories of justice prevailing against corporate power. Now, as public pressure mounts, will AeroCorp finally take meaningful action, or will they continue trying to minimize this growing crisis? Within AeroCorp's executive suite, fierce debates erupted about response strategy. Conservative board members advocated fighting the allegations and focusing solely on technical merits of their aircraft. "We can't allow procurement decisions to be influenced by peripheral social issues," argued board member Richard Hoffman. "Our aircraft specifications are superior. That should be the only relevant factor." Progressive executives countered that the discrimination issue reflected legitimate concerns about corporate culture that potential partners rightfully considered. "This isn't peripheral," insisted Chief Diversity Officer Amara Peterson. "How we treat people, including potential business partners, speaks directly to our operational integrity. If we marginalize people based on appearance, what other corners are we cutting?" As internal divisions deepened, a boycott movement gained momentum. Several corporate travel departments announced temporary suspensions of Atlantic Airways bookings pending resolution of the discrimination concerns. Industry analysts downgraded AeroCorp stock, citing both the potential contract loss and reputational damage. Throughout the growing crisis, Marcus maintained his professional focus, declining most interview requests and continuing the legitimate contract evaluation process. His restraint in leveraging his newfound public platform impressed many observers, though some advocates urged him to demand more immediate changes. "I understand the desire for quick action," he explained to mentor Dr. Chen during a private conversation. "But lasting change requires systematic pressure, not just immediate consequences. The industry is watching how both organizations respond. That visibility creates more accountability than any individual demand I could make." As public attention intensified, both organizations recognized that their response to this crisis would define their reputations far beyond a single contract decision. The fundamental question remained: would corporate America address discrimination with meaningful reform, or would public relations strategies once again substitute for actual change? Precision accountability. Partners arrived at AeroCorp headquarters with a reputation for unflinching corporate investigations. The independent firm, hired reluctantly by AeroCorp's board following shareholder pressure, specialized in workplace culture assessments with particular expertise in discrimination cases. Our process is thorough and impartial, explained lead investigator Dr. Eliza Montgomery during the initial meeting with executives. We require complete access to personnel records, internal communications, training materials, complaint histories, and security footage. All employees must be made available for confidential interviews without fear of retaliation. The investigation began with Atlantic Airways flight ATL 345. Security footage from multiple aircraft cameras revealed interactions starkly different from the crew's written accounts. Far from sneaking into first class, Marcus had walked openly through an unguarded curtain divider. The footage showed Brenda Myers immediately confronting him with visibly hostile body language, while Richard Tanner later approached with hand positioned near his service phone, adopting an authoritative stance typically reserved for security threats. More telling still, the investigation uncovered timestamps showing 3 white passengers had relocated to empty premium seats during the same flight without intervention. When investigators questioned the crew about this discrepancy, both claimed they hadn't noticed the other movements. The selective enforcement pattern is statistically significant, Dr. Montgomery noted in her preliminary report. Review of 50 randomly selected flights shows first-class boundary enforcement occurring 3 times more frequently with passengers of color than white passengers exhibiting identical behaviors. As the investigation expanded beyond the single incident, internal communications revealed troubling patterns. Customer service representatives had been instructed to categorize racial discrimination complaints under general service quality metrics, effectively burying them statistically. Training materials emphasized passenger compliance and cabin integrity, with minimal content addressing unconscious bias or cultural sensitivity. Most damaging were emails between Atlantic Airways executives discussing previous discrimination complaints. One message from the Chief Operating Officer to the Human Resources Director read, "Another diversity headache. Handle with standard protocol. Acknowledge concern. Offer minimal compensation. Avoid admission of fault." These complaints waste valuable resources better spent on operational improvements. The investigation uncovered Brenda Myers' concerning history. 12 discrimination complaints in 3 years, none resulting in disciplinary action. Her personnel file contained supervisor notes praising her strong boundary enforcement and unwavering adherence to policy without addressing the pattern of complaints. Richard Tanner's record revealed fewer direct discrimination complaints, but documented instances of escalating minor infractions to security issues, almost exclusively with minority passengers. His performance reviews repeatedly commended his authoritative presence and ability to maintain control of difficult situations. When investigators expanded their scope to Atlantic Airways' broader practices, they discovered the airline's much-touted diversity training consisted of a 30-minute online module with no testing or accountability measures. The Diversity and Inclusion Department operated with minimal authority and served primarily in advisory capacity with no enforcement power. 2 weeks into the investigation, AeroCorp executives received the preliminary findings with visible alarm. "This goes beyond individual behavior," Dr. Montgomery explained. "Our assessment indicates systematic failures across multiple organizational levels. Customer service protocols actively suppress discrimination concerns. Training prioritizes rule enforcement over equitable treatment. Performance metrics reward confrontational approaches without considering disparate impact." The investigation continued expanding as current and former employees began coming forward with additional accounts. Flight attendant Jasmine Williams, who had resigned 6 months earlier, provided documentation of her internal complaints about discriminatory practices. "I reported instances where minority passengers received different treatment," she explained during her confidential interview. "Management responded that I was oversensitive and should focus on standard procedures rather than looking for problems." Ground crew supervisor Michael Rodriguez shared similar experiences. "We were trained to flag suspicious passengers for additional scrutiny. When I pointed out the criteria seemed to disproportionately target people of color, I was told security concerns overrode political correctness." 3 weeks into the investigation, Dr. Montgomery delivered the completed report to AeroCorp's board. The 300-page document detailed systematic problems throughout Atlantic Airways' culture, training, policies, and practices. Most critically, it connected these issues directly to AeroCorp's corporate oversight failures and prioritization of operational metrics over ethical considerations. Board member Richard Hoffman dismissed the findings. "This report overreaches. We hired you to investigate a specific incident, not conduct a company-wide culture critique." Dr. Montgomery remained firm. "The specific incident cannot be understood in isolation. It manifested from systemic failures that originate at the highest levels of corporate governance. The patterns we've documented indicate problems embedded in organizational culture, not merely individual behavior." The board debated how to proceed with the damaging report. Conservative members advocated for minimal disclosure, acknowledging problems while emphasizing planned improvements. Progressive members argued for full transparency to rebuild trust. Ultimately, the board voted 7-5 to keep the full report confidential, releasing only selected findings with an accompanying improvement plan. Their decision, intended to control narrative and minimize damage, backfired spectacularly when key sections leaked to industry publication Aviation Weekly within 48 hours. The leaked portions included particularly damning internal communications and statistical evidence of discriminatory patterns. Industry analysts, already watching the situation closely, immediately questioned whether AeroCorp's leadership could implement genuine reform given their apparent reluctance to acknowledge the scope of problems. Separately, Global Aerospace Industries received a confidential copy of the complete report from a sympathetic AeroCorp board member, concerned about the company's authentic commitment to addressing the findings. Marcus and the procurement team reviewed the document thoroughly, incorporating its insights into their ongoing contract evaluation. "The investigation confirms what the initial incident suggested," Marcus noted during a private meeting with CEO Victoria Blackwell. "This isn't about individual bad actors, but corporate culture that enables discrimination while suppressing accountability." Victoria nodded grimly. "The question becomes whether they're capable of meaningful change, and whether we can partner with an organization whose ethical foundations appear this compromised." As investigation findings continued reaching public awareness through strategic leaks, pressure mounted on AeroCorp to implement significant reforms rather than cosmetic changes. Atlantic Airways announced that Brenda Myers and Richard Tanner had been placed on extended administrative leave while a comprehensive review continued. But public skepticism about the company's commitment to authentic change continued growing. The investigation had transformed a single incident into a case study of corporate America's approach to discrimination, revealing how systems designed for efficiency and liability protection often perpetuated precisely the problems they claimed to address. Whether this revelation would force meaningful change remained the central question as the contract decision date approached. The Global Aerospace Industries Procurement Committee assembled in the executive boardroom, surrounded by technical specifications, financial analyses, and corporate assessment reports. 6 senior executives would evaluate proposals from 3 finalists: AeroCorp, Westbrook Aerospace, and Norland Aviation. Their recommendation would determine which manufacturer received the coveted $2 billion fleet replacement contract. Marcus Johnson sat at the head of the table as procurement director, though he had recused himself from voting given his personal experience with AeroCorp's subsidiary. His role today was facilitating the committee's final deliberations and ensuring their evaluation process maintained absolute integrity. "We've completed extensive assessments in 3 categories," Marcus reminded the committee: technical specifications and performance metrics, financial terms including purchase price, maintenance costs, and operational efficiency, and corporate culture alignment including ethical practices, sustainability commitments, and organizational values. Chief Technology Officer James Rivera presented the technical assessment first. AeroCorp's proposed aircraft demonstrates marginal advantages in fuel efficiency, approximately 4% improvement over Westbrook and 6% over Norland. Their maintenance intervals are slightly longer, potentially reducing downtime. Chief Financial Officer Diane Matsuda followed with the financial analysis. AeroCorp's pricing structure offers the lowest initial acquisition cost, though Westbrook's maintenance program may provide better lifetime value depending on our usage patterns. Most committee members had anticipated technical and financial advantages for AeroCorp. The aerospace giant's manufacturing capabilities and economies of scale typically allowed them to outperform smaller competitors on traditional metrics. The critical question remained whether these advantages would outweigh the corporate culture concerns. Senior VP of Operations Michael Chen presented the ethics and culture assessment. All three manufacturers provided diversity statistics, sustainability commitments, and ethical guidelines. However, independent evaluation of their implementation shows significant variation. The committee reviewed detailed analyses of each company's actual practices beyond their stated policies. Westbrook and Norland demonstrated consistent alignment between public commitments and internal practices, though neither reached perfection. AeroCorp's assessment revealed substantial disconnections between their public positions and operational realities. The independent investigation of Atlantic Airways reveals systematic failures that originate in parent company oversight, Michael continued. The pattern suggests prioritization of operational metrics and liability limitation over ethical practices and accountability. Discussion continued for hours as committee members weighed different factors. Technical performance clearly favored AeroCorp. Financial analysis showed mixed advantages depending on prioritized factors. Corporate culture assessment unmistakably favored the competitors. The question becomes whether technical superiority outweighs ethical concerns, observed Chief Strategy Officer Layla Washington. We're not just purchasing aircraft, but establishing a decades-long partnership. Maintenance, training, support, all require ongoing collaboration with the manufacturer. As deliberations continued, AeroCorp made a final desperate attempt to secure the contract. Their representatives delivered an unprecedented concession package, including price reductions, extended warranties, and expansive commitments to diversity initiatives and accountability measures. They're clearly willing to make financial sacrifices to maintain this relationship, noted Diane Matsuda. The question is whether their commitment to cultural change is equally genuine. By late afternoon, the committee remained deadlocked. 3 members prioritized technical and financial advantages. 3 emphasized ethical concerns and partnership compatibility. Without Marcus's vote, they couldn't reach majority consensus. CEO Victoria Blackwell joined the meeting for the final discussion. After reviewing their analysis, she turned to Marcus. I understand you've recused yourself from voting to maintain objectivity given your personal experience. However, your professional assessment remains valuable. What's your recommendation based strictly on procurement considerations? Marcus considered carefully before responding. My personal experience created awareness of issues I might otherwise have missed, but my recommendation is based entirely on procurement criteria. The central question is which manufacturer provides the best overall value for a long-term partnership. He continued thoughtfully. Technical specifications matter significantly. 4% fuel efficiency across a fleet this size translates to millions in operational savings. Financial terms are obviously important to shareholder value, but corporate culture directly impacts execution, support, and relationship sustainability. The committee listened intently as Marcus articulated his analysis. The investigation revealed AeroCorp's systematic prioritization of metrics over ethics, efficiency over equity, and damage control over accountability. These aren't isolated incidents but leadership choices that manifest throughout their operations. My concern isn't whether they discriminated against me personally, but whether an organization with these embedded values can deliver on their technical promises and maintain sustainable partnership. After requesting time to consider all factors, Marcus spent the night reviewing documentation from all manufacturers. He examined technical specifications with engineering precision, evaluating not just performance claims but testing methodologies and validation procedures. He analyzed financial models, calculating true lifetime costs beyond initial acquisition. Most critically, he assessed corporate culture evidence, looking beyond policies to implementation patterns. By morning, he had prepared his final recommendation document, a comprehensive analysis integrating all evaluation criteria. His conclusion reflected not emotional response to personal experience, but professional judgment about partnership viability. As committee members received his analysis, reactions varied from surprise to vindication. The document did not dismiss AeroCorp's technical advantages but contextualized them within broader partnership considerations. The assessment didn't recommend categorically excluding manufacturers with cultural problems, but emphasized genuine commitment to improvement over cosmetic changes. With renewed perspective, the committee reconvened for final deliberations. The contract announcement ceremony awaited, with industry leaders and financial analysts gathered to witness a decision with implications extending far beyond aircraft acquisition. The contract announcement ceremony transformed San Francisco's Waterfront Conference Center into a showcase of aerospace innovation and corporate competition. Technical exhibitions displayed next-generation materials and propulsion systems, while company representatives networked aggressively, knowing a $2 billion decision hung in the balance. Industry leaders filled the main auditorium to capacity. AeroCorp executives appeared confidently poised near the front, their technical advantages widely acknowledged throughout the industry. Competing manufacturers maintained professional composure, despite the prevailing assumption that AeroCorp's superior specifications would secure the contract. Global Aerospace Industries CEO Victoria Blackwell opened the ceremony with a brief overview of the evaluation process. This decision represents not merely an aircraft acquisition, but a strategic partnership that will influence our operations for decades. Our assessment considered multiple factors beyond initial purchase price: operational efficiency, maintenance requirements, technical innovation, and corporate culture alignment. Marcus Johnson followed, approaching the podium to immediate murmurs throughout the audience. His unexpected confrontation with AeroCorp at the previous industry conference had transformed a procurement process typically conducted behind closed doors into public drama that transcended the aerospace industry. The procurement committee conducted a comprehensive evaluation focusing on 3 primary categories. Marcus began, his voice calm and professional. Technical specifications and performance, financial terms and lifetime value, corporate culture and partnership compatibility. He detailed the evaluation process methodically, explaining how each manufacturer had demonstrated strengths in different areas. AeroCorp's technical advantages received appropriate acknowledgement alongside competitor strengths. The assessment process description emphasized objective criteria and thorough analysis without revealing the outcome prematurely. Ultimately, procurement decisions involve complex interactions between multiple factors, Marcus continued. The committee carefully evaluated how these factors combine to create successful long-term partnerships rather than merely transactional purchases. Throughout the auditorium, executives leaned forward in anticipation. Financial analysts prepared to transmit the decision to trading desks worldwide. Industry reporters positioned recording devices to capture the announcement. After thorough evaluation across all criteria, Marcus stated clearly, Global Aerospace Industries has selected Westbrook Aerospace as our manufacturing partner for the fleet replacement program. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. AeroCorp CEO Thomas Reynolds visibly paled as the announcement registered. Westbrook executives appeared momentarily stunned before breaking into restrained celebration. While all finalists presented compelling proposals with unique strengths, Marcus continued, Westbrook demonstrated the optimal balance of technical capability, financial terms, and organizational alignment with our corporate values and operational needs. The implicit message was clear without requiring explicit statement. AeroCorp's technical advantages hadn't outweighed their corporate culture deficiencies. The discrimination incident hadn't determined the outcome alone, but had revealed deeper organizational issues relevant to partnership evaluation. As industry reactions rippled through the auditorium, Marcus surprised the audience further. Additionally, I want to address the broader implications of our evaluation process. The investigation into Atlantic Airways' discriminatory practices revealed systemic issues throughout their parent organization that directly impact partnership viability. He proceeded to read key findings from the investigation that had previously remained confidential: statistical evidence of discriminatory patterns, internal communications revealing prioritization of metrics over ethics, and systematic suppression of accountability. These findings matter not because they affected me personally, Marcus emphasized, but because they reveal operational priorities and corporate values that manifest throughout business relationships. When organizations prioritize appearances over accountability, metrics over humanity, and damage control over improvement, these choices eventually compromise technical execution and partnership sustainability. The audience listened with rapt attention as Marcus shifted from specific contract announcement to broader industry implications. Today, Global Aerospace Industries announces an additional initiative extending beyond this procurement decision. We're establishing the Aviation Equity Alliance, an industry consortium focused on implementing measurable accountability standards for inclusive practices throughout the aerospace sector. The announcement caught everyone by surprise, including many global executives who hadn't been briefed on this additional initiative. Initial funding will support independent assessment methodologies, transparent reporting mechanisms, and expertise sharing across participating organizations. We invite all manufacturers and airlines to join this effort toward creating an industry where technical excellence and ethical practices strengthen rather than compete with each other. The auditorium erupted in applause, not merely polite acknowledgement, but genuine recognition that something significant had shifted in the industry landscape. Several executives from competing organizations immediately approached global representatives to express interest in the consortium. Conspicuously absent from the celebration, AeroCorp executives huddled in urgent consultation. The loss of a $2 billion contract represented immediate financial damage, but the public reading of investigation findings suggested their problems extended far beyond a single lost opportunity. Within days, Atlantic Airways announced substantial policy changes, including revised training programs, transparent complaint handling procedures, and appointment of former civil rights attorney James Washington as Chief Accountability Officer. Flight attendants Brenda Myers and Richard Tanner were ultimately terminated following comprehensive review of their service histories and multiple corroborated complaints. More significantly, AeroCorp's board forced the resignation of executives who had resisted transparency and accountability throughout the crisis. The aerospace giant publicly committed to participating in the Aviation Equity Alliance, though industry observers remained skeptical about whether their involvement represented genuine commitment or damage control. 12 months later, Marcus Johnson boarded an Atlantic Airways flight from Chicago to Seattle. His promotion to executive vice president at Global Aerospace had increased his travel schedule, though he still typically chose economy class out of personal preference. As he settled into his seat, a flight attendant approached with unexpected news. "Mr. Johnson, we have an available first-class seat if you'd like to move forward." The offer came without presumption, judgment, or suspicion, simply professional courtesy. Marcus noted the attendant's name badge showed Graduate Inclusive Service Leadership Program beneath her name. As the aircraft prepared for departure, the captain's voice came through the cabin speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Atlantic Airways Flight 2218. I'm proud to announce that today's crew has completed the Marcus Johnson Professional Standards Program, emphasizing both operational excellence and inclusive service. We're committed to ensuring every passenger experiences dignity and respect throughout their journey." Marcus smiled slightly at the announcement, recognizing that individual courage and institutional accountability had combined to create meaningful change. What began as discrimination against a single passenger had catalyzed transformation affecting thousands of employees and millions of travelers. The aircraft accelerated down the runway and lifted into clear skies, carrying both passengers and the weight of an industry learning that technical excellence and human dignity could, and must, fly together. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination but had the power to create real change? Has this story changed how you'll respond to similar situations in your own life? Comment below with your thoughts and experiences. If you believe companies should be held accountable for discriminatory practices, give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice prevailing against corporate power, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Thank you for watching, and remember, one person with courage and conviction can transform entire systems. This powerful narrative illustrates that systemic change requires both individual courage and institutional accountability. When Marcus encountered discrimination, he didn't simply accept token compensation, but insisted on addressing root causes. His approach demonstrates how documenting incidents thoroughly, pursuing proper channels first, and maintaining professional integrity throughout can create leverage for meaningful reform. The story reveals how discrimination often reflects deeper, organizational failures rather than isolated events, showing that corporate culture directly impacts business relationships and operational excellence. Most importantly, it teaches that one person standing firmly for justice can transform not just a single company, but an entire industry. Real change happens when we refuse to accept superficial solutions and instead demand systems that honor human dignity alongside technical performance.